If you want to get noticed by recruiters at all levels of basketball, then ePlay's Hoops at Home Challenge is your opportunity. Here's how you can participate in the Hoops at Home Challenge and create your very own ePlay profile for recruiters and for yourself to watch your development throughout your career. Each week, we'll put out a specific combine drill for you to complete. Simply record yourself doing the drill, following our specific video instructions, and post the video to your own social media profile on Twitter or Instagram. Tag ePlay Basketball and then use the hashtag HoopsAtHome. Then go to ePlay.com/hoopsathome, click the Get Started button at the bottom of the screen, and fill out the information to start your very own ePlay profile. Once your ePlay profile is live, you can upload additional combine drills in the video workout section of your profile for approval. Check back to ePlay Basketball for future combine drills and start building your profile so numbers can tell your story.
This is Brandon Dean, NBA Skills Trainer and Director of Player Development for ePlay. Over the next few weeks, we'll be putting out a series of challenges for our Hoops at Home Challenge. These challenges will simulate drills performed at our ePlay Combines as well as drills performed at the NBA Combine. This week's drill is the three-quarter court sprint. This is one of the simplest drills to perform, but it's one that a lot of scouts take into consideration when they look at your speed and how quick you can get to that speed. For this drill, you need to set up one place marker 70.5 feet away from your desired starting point. On your go, you're going to sprint all the way through the cone as fast as you can. Good luck.
I know that you've seen this obviously before because I welcome everybody to bob a little bit. If you feel it, go ahead and bob your head just a little bit.
It's got a beat to it.
It's nice, man. It feels good. It's like it's a nice day. Everybody, it's a nice day where you are. It's a nice day here. So it's a good, feel good kind of song. So happy to be back with you guys. ePlay, Numbers Tell Your Story podcast. I am Jamie Horton here with you as always, and a very special guest joins me today. Our friend and yours, or your friend and mine, Mr. Nick Angstadt from the Locked On Mavs podcast. He does a lot of media type of things, and we're going to discuss all of those as we run down the next hour or so. We'll see how much time we have, see how much we can get into here with Nick. But we are so happy to have you, and we are so glad to be back here on the ePlay Numbers Tell Your Story podcast. So, Nick, let's just jump right into it, my friend. How are things? Obviously, we're all dealing with this global pandemic right now, coronavirus, COVID-19. It's hard to stay off of the media or stay out of, of the consumption of these things and find out that, we've got numbers that are still climbing. It's still a lot of worry about that. But how have you been dealing with this out in Daytona, Florida, and how's your family dealing with it as well, man?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jamie. It's just like one thing after another, really. Things just keep popping up, and it just seems like, life will never go back to normal. And for some things, it's good that things will never go back to normal. There's certain, aspects, the social justice issues, the protests for George Floyd, all those things. It's great that some of those things will not go back to normal. The COVID-19 stuff has changed a lot of things, in my life specifically. We had, people don't usually care about, well, how's the guy that's doing like sports media for his job? How's he doing? Yeah, he gets to do his dream job, but it gets put on furlough and stopped for a little bit. And then NBA goes away for a little bit, but we'll be okay. Family's going to be okay. We're hanging out over here. Still doing Locked On Mavs every day, which has been interesting to try and figure out what to talk about. But we've had lots of experience doing off season and things like that. So if you're a Mavericks fan, or if you just love the NBA, come listen to Locked On Mavericks.
Absolutely. I'd love to be a part of that one as well. I'd love to jump on with you guys and just talk shop and talk hoops and talk Mavs. Been a Mavericks fan since I was in diapers. Like Fat Lever was one of my favorite players, and he was barely a Maverick. But by the time he was a Maverick, he had like metal legs. The guy was so broken down. But he was one of my favorite players of all time. So I'm so happy to have you, man. By the way, you guys can follow Nick on Twitter at Nick Van Exit. Nick Van Exit, which every time I see it, I go Nick Van Exel. It's just habit, but Nick Van Exit, and it's at Locked On Mavs as well for if you want to follow the podcast on Twitter there as well. So Nick, let's just jump right into it, man. It's a celebratory time in terms of the NBA, right? We're getting basketball back. It looks like July 31st. Woj tweeted out today that it could be July the 30th. So maybe 24 hours. Yeah, maybe a little bit early. Maybe we get a 24-hour reprieve and we don't have to wait till the 31st. My gosh, and what a difference that would make. But before we get into that, I want to kind of talk about your background a little bit, your media background, how you got into this, and we'll start there. I like to hear about everybody's basketball story. So what got you into this? What got you into the media, and what made you want to be a member of the media that covers sports?
Yeah, so I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was born in Los Angeles first. My family moved, and I grew up loving the Los Angeles Lakers teams, the team that won the three-peat, Kobe and Powell teams after that. I just grew up loving those teams so much and loving basketball. Got into media, in high school. I was working on our video yearbook and had our school news program that we did once a month. I was part of, called NBC, and so I got into media in that way. Went off to college and then continued that. I went to Dallas Baptist University, started covering the Mavericks for a site called, it was Mavs Fanatic at the time. It's now called Dallas Sports Fanatic. So I started covering for them. I was covering the Mavericks in the locker room, was credentialed, moved over to Mavs Moneyball, started doing some podcasts here and there, and then eventually got, Locked On Mavericks with the Locked On Podcast Network. And so I've been doing that now. Locked On Mavericks I've been doing now for 3 years. I was covering the Mavericks for 2 years before that. So that's basically how I got into it. Now I'm working with ePlay. I'm doing lots of social media stuff for the Locked On Network. And I've been doing this full time for a little over a year, which is kind of amazing. Didn't think I would get to this so fast, but here we are.
So a Lakers fan, right? So we're a Lakers fan, but we're also a Mavericks fan. So that works out. I mean, a lot of us Mavericks fans, I see that back there. Yeah. I also see, is that a Magic jersey? Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just a random player, but it's game used.
Which random players? I'm trying to think who 43 is right off the top of my head.
You would never guess it, and I can't remember the guy's name. It's just a random person, but my uncle gave it to me. It was like a preseason game-worn jersey, and I love those jerseys with the stars, the Orlando Stars on them.
Absolutely, man. That was a good look back in the day. And then they went to, the uniforms have evolved, especially since my time. In the 90s, I think, were some of the worst uniforms that we've ever seen. Orlando, though, that Orlando 90s uniform was pretty darn solid. I think the Rockets really screwed up their opportunity back in the 90s to make a decent, less cartoonish looking uniform. That'd be another really good conversation about power ranking basketball uniforms through the years. So from speaking for Mavs Nation and speaking from a Mavericks fan, that's okay. Being a Lakers fan and a Mavericks fan is okay. If you were a Spurs fan or a Rockets fan, we'd probably have to have a different conversation, but it's not that serious, Nick. So
a lot of people don't agree with you, though. A lot of people say being a Lakers fan, you can't understand what Mavericks fans have gone through. But I bring the outside perspective. My co-host Isaac Harris has been a Mavs fan his whole life, so he brings the diehard perspective on his side, and I bring the outside perspective. So I understand what it's like to win multiple championships. So I can give that perspective.
If we're being honest, for those Mavs fans who are like, you don't understand what you've been through. If we're really being honest, the Mavericks haven't been a great franchise for a historic period of time, right? The Dirk era, which people forget, started off really rocky. Dirk was not that awesome for several years. It took Dirk a couple of years to really kind of find himself.
Like 2 years,
a couple of years to really find himself as a
most improved player candidate his second year, right?
For sure. Yeah, but it took, it was still a tough time. There was a 50-game shortened season. They went 20-30 or something like that. I think Gary Trent was the best player they had on that team that year, but it took a couple of years for that guy to really, and then turn it on. And then you're talking about all those 50-win seasons, and it was great. It was really an amazing couple of decades for Mavericks fans. But in terms of heartbreak, 06 was awful. I still wish that I could go back and figure out what happened there. And then 07, I thought that team was a juggernaut, and then they just ran into the perfect storm in Golden State.
It's amazing.
So in terms of that, look, Mavs fans, pump the brakes just a little bit. We don't have this just historic basketball franchise type of thing.
I'm going to push back on that, though, because two decades of solid basketball like that, where there's the highs of having a 67-win team, of having two finals teams, one winning the finals, that's more success than a lot of franchises have ever had in their whole existence. The Knicks haven't been that good since like the 70s, right?
Right.
The Timberwolves have literally never been that good. The Hawks have never really been that good. I mean, there's so many franchises that haven't had the success the Mavericks have.
Sure.
And they've been a great franchise for a decent amount of time, which has been pretty awesome for them.
And I completely agree with that. I just mean when you're comparing the Lakers and the Mavericks, it's a whole different ball game. Even with the Knicks, they've been terrible for so long, but they sell out the Garden every night. Those fans have they've been through some hard times. You know what I mean? Like the Mavericks have been through some hard times, but we got to enjoy 2 decades of really good basketball. And now you've got a team that's once again very young, very, very good, and very promising moving forward. You're right back at it. You've got another superstar in Luka Doncic, your next franchise cornerstone piece that you hope has the same kind of Dirk success and stays as long as Dirk. But before we talk specific Mavs, because I love that aspect here with your closeness with the team and covering them on a daily basis. The NBA is back, Nick. The NBA is coming back July 30th, maybe the 31st, doesn't matter. It is the end of July, and it's a 2-month sprint to the first part of October. So kind of help me break down a little bit of how this is going to work out. How many teams? There's 8 regular season games left. So kind of give me a snapshot of how this thing is going to look.
Yeah, so the NBA is coming back with 22 teams, and they're coming back with all 16 playoff teams that are already there. So the top 8 seeds in each conference. And then for some reason, they're bringing back the Washington Wizards, who are 24-40. They're bringing back on the Eastern Conference, and that's the only extra team they're bringing in the Eastern Conference. And the Western Conference are bringing Portland, New Orleans, Sacramento, San Antonio, and Phoenix for some reason. And they're going to try and play all those teams up to try and make a play-in tournament of sorts. Each team that comes back is going to play 8 games, and then the play-in tournament will only happen if the teams 9 through 12 or whatever, 13 with Phoenix, if they're within 4 games of the 8th seed. So right now, let's say Portland and New Orleans are both 3.5 games from Memphis. So that would trigger a play-in tournament, which is not even really a tournament, but that's what they're calling it. It's basically a play-in series where whichever team is the closest to that 8th seed. So let's say it's Portland. Portland plays a series with Memphis. Portland has to win 2 games. Memphis only has to win 1 game. So it's kind of more like a play-in game / games potentially. And so that's where the most that they could play is 3, right? Because if I think, or 2, because Portland would have to win 2 games. And if Memphis, I don't know. It's very strange how it's going to work out in that way. But they are bringing all those teams back, 8 regular season games for all the teams, and then they're going to go into the playoffs after they figure out the 8th seed in some kind of play-in series, play-in fashion.
So even then, right, again, visiting here with Nick Angstadt, host of the Locked On Mavs podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Nick Van Exit, as well as the podcast at Locked On Mavs. So a team like the Mavericks, right, they were the 7th seed. They were 7th seed as soon as play stopped. 40 wins for this basketball team. Not that matters right now. But I was reading somewhere that their magic so their magic number is still 2, right? So they need to have they qualified for the playoffs? Are they in the playoffs? There's still some confusion for me in some of those areas. You're the expert. You cover this every day. Those 16 teams, there are 16 teams that have already qualified for the playoffs, right? But they still have to play the 8 regular season games, the finale, to finish out. Like, am I right?
They're going to play 8 regular season games. So it would be we're E-Play. Numbers tell your story. The numbers would say it's almost impossible for the Mavericks to miss the playoffs at this point.
Right.
I think if they lost all 8 games and Memphis won all 8 games in some fashion like that, or maybe just 7-1 and 1-7 for them, that they could miss the playoffs. But I don't even think that that's possible. Like you said, magic number I think is 2. I think it's probably, I would have to do the math on it, but it just seems so impossible that they would lose all those games. They'd have to lose 7 or 8 of those 8 games. So the Mavericks are essentially in the playoffs. I think we can pretty much, feel that. They're 7 games up on Memphis. They're, game and a half back from Houston and Oklahoma City. So they're closer to moving up than they are to actually missing out.
And the seeding as it was when the season stopped is still the same. So if it was playoffs started today, it would be the Mavs and the Clippers, yeah?
If the playoffs started, which it's not, but if the playoffs did start, they would start to play the Clippers. They have 8 games, though, so they could move ahead of Houston, move ahead of Oklahoma City. The Clippers could move back. They're 1.5 games up on Denver. They could move back to 3. There's all different scenarios that could happen. And so that's what makes it's a little bit more exciting, because there's something could actually happen. There could be actual movement. And it's not like they're playing 1 or 2 games where they're going directly into the playoffs where just nothing can happen between now and then, and your destiny is kind of set.
So there are some big stories here, right? So even though San Antonio is getting the opportunity to come back, the likelihood of them continuing their 22-year playoff run is likely coming to an end. LaMarcus Aldridge, LaMarcus Aldridge is done. He's getting
it's done.
Yeah, so
Calling
that's the storyline.
TNT guys are sending them fishing.
There you go. God, I'm so ready for having that back, man. This is so great. Those graphics are fantastic. You got a team like Portland that you mentioned. Portland, they're dangerous. You got a guy like Dame Lillard. That team's dangerous, and they sort of underperformed this year. They were very underwhelming, if you will, but there were times where we saw flashes of this team being very good. They're a dangerous team. Of those teams that are kind of on the bubble right now, who do you think are the teams that the rest of the league sort of needs to look out for?
I don't think anyone's looking out for any of those teams. Maybe if you're Memphis, you're looking out for some of those teams, but odds are that one of those teams, you're talking about Portland, you're talking about New Orleans, San Antonio, Sacramento, and Memphis, all those teams are going to play the Lakers. And I just can't imagine, unless LeBron, tests positive, or LeBron gets hurt or something where he's out. And even then, they still have Anthony Davis. If both those guys go down, then potentially, one of those teams could win. But I don't see any of those teams. I mean, those teams will be fun to watch for a play-in scenario. They'll be fun to watch for the 8 regular season games, as they're going to hopefully try hard and play some good basketball eventually. But they're all going to run into the Lakers, and I just don't see any of those teams getting past them at all.
Is that the clear front runner for Larry O'Brien at this point?
I don't think so. I honestly think the Clippers are still the front runner. They have Kawhi Leonard. He's probably the best player in the NBA. Definitely the best playoff player in the NBA right now. I would even put him over LeBron right now, just because of his age, his defensive prowess. The cast around him is a little bit better. The Paul George and Patrick Beverly. You have the 6-man guys in Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell. I think the Clippers are still the favorite there, which is kind of odd, but they've taken their pedal off. They're taking the foot off the pedal a little bit during the regular season, and the playoffs is when they said they were going to turn it on. So we'll see what happens with them, and see even how serious they take these 8 regular season games. But that team is eventually going to put it all together and turn it on. They've just been all injured at different times. We haven't seen them full strength in a while.
Again, here on the ePlay Numbers Tell Your Story podcast, we are so happy to be back with you guys, and we thank you guys for joining us, visiting with Nick Angstadt. He's a member of our ePlay family, but he's also the host of the Locked On Mavs podcast. You can follow him at Nick Van Exit on Twitter, as well as the at Locked On Mavs podcast there as well.
This is your radio background coming out again. You've introduced me 3 or 4 times.
It's part of it. Got to do it, man.
You do the reset, which is what radio does. But here in the podcast world, everyone's been listening the whole time. So.
I don't have the graphic. I don't have the graphic thrown up underneath your name yet. So once I have that, but that is just part of my radio.
It's in the description though. It's down there.
Fair enough, man. Golly.
Just trying to help you out here.
Who stands to benefit the most from this? All right. So we've had
me. I do.
Yeah. Besides fans.
No, media people coming back finally.
Well, you're a fan as well. You got to be a fan in order to do some of this stuff.
For sure.
Besides fans, which teams with this layoff stand to benefit the most? Because there's a lot. We talked about the Mavericks. Kristaps Porzingis was 25-10, over the last 15 games or whatever of the regular season. He was finally getting his stride, but you could also tell that I think he was favoring that leg a little bit. I still think there was that time of him working in that comfort level, in playing at that high level again, and getting, feeling confident in that knee. But apart from a team like that or a player like that, of all the teams in this playoff picture right now, with this layoff, who do you think stands to benefit the most from this time off?
Yeah, the other thing that people don't talk about with the Mavericks, and this is including myself, who hosts a 5-day-a-week Mavericks podcast, is Luka was dealing with so many random injuries towards the end of that, the end of the first part of the season, or the first 3/4 part of the season. He was dealing with thumb injuries. He was dealing with ankle stuff. He was dealing with knee stuff, just all random things that would only keep him out 1 or 2 games, but it still held him out of play. And so I think he's really going to benefit. We got the report the other day, from Callie Kaplan from Luka's trainer that he's not in the best shape right now, which was kind of true before the layoff. I mean, he wasn't necessarily in the best shape anyway, but hopefully he'll get back into game shape, and he'll have this 3-week training camp and then the 8 regular season games to get back into shape. But hopefully the injury side of it is going to be better for Luka. The other teams that you're looking at that this really helped is the Sixers for sure. Ben Simmons was potentially going to miss the playoffs. He's going to be back. You look at a team like the Lakers. You wonder if time off is going to help LeBron. He was going to have to carry a huge load down the stretch if that team was going to keep the 1 seed and then keep the momentum. And if LeBron was going to go for the MVP, that's off the table. At this point now, that team definitely gets a break. There's a couple teams. You look at Portland, that's a team that really has benefited from the layoff. You're getting Jusuf Nurkic back. They're going to get him back in a couple days before the stoppage anyway, but they're going to get him back. They're also going to get Zach Collins back. That's huge for them. That's one of the reasons why they're down, where they are. They should be a playoff team. They should be right in it. And
absolutely,
they've been completely out of it because of Nurkic and Zach Collins and all the injuries. They have like 3 iterations of this team throughout the year. But that team, those teams
goes to show you how dang good Dame Lillard is. Like, it just shows you how good that guy is. Like, he's so good. And obviously, it's got another guy there that can play ball too. But Damian Lillard is just so good.
Him and CJ, that you can carry an offense with that backcourt right there. Boom.
Right.
Doesn't matter who anybody else is on the floor. And at times they've had random other dudes on the floor and they've still had a good offense.
And interior defense and rebounding was lacking, and that's a huge thing. Obviously, here at ePlay, we talk about those things a lot. Numbers tell your story. And when you are lacking in those categories, it's hard to win basketball games. It's hard to win NBA games on any given night anyway. I want to ask you about this format. Do you like it? Because I'm happy. I think I'm overlooking the fact that some of the format I'm not really super thrilled about. I think you could have done a lot more to kind of engage fans. But how much of this was done to also maybe kind of meet some of these television contracts too, so they can get to meet some of the money? Obviously, I know that's a necessity for the NBA because it is still a business. But do you think this format is a good one?
Yeah, they had to play a certain number of games to get to that TV contract for a lot of these teams. And so I don't exactly know how all that is working out. And I personally don't necessarily even care if they get the TV money, even though that could potentially affect the salary cap, in future years, because it all depends on the BRI, the basketball related income. So that could come back to bite everyone, in the nose later.
For sure.
But I like the fact that they're playing some regular season games. I don't really care for the play-in thing, and you could probably tell by the way I explained it, because you're not really getting, it's not necessarily a fair shot for all these teams, and then it's not really a tournament, so you're not getting the 1 game elimination for 4 teams, and then you go meet in the middle, those teams meet, and then whoever wins gets the 8th seed. It's kind of whoever's the closest, and then they just play a couple games against that 8th seed potentially. And so I wanted kind of a 4-team format or something like that, where we'd get some March Madness style, tournaments. But I mean, it's not eventually a group into groups of like 4 or 5, and then they'd all play each other, and then whoever's the best record comes out of that, and then that becomes the second round after that. And that was an interesting idea, but I like that they try to keep it as streamlined and as similar as possible, because there's already going to be an asterisk next to this.
Sure.
Whoever wins the championship, people are going to put asterisks next to it. And if you keep it the format, as similar as possible, then it won't be as big of an asterisk. Some people are still going to put it there, but
And I think part of the thought process there too, Nick, is even though you're glad to have it back and you're glad to get your money and you're glad to have your fans back and all this other kind of stuff, if you're the NBA, I don't want to run the risk of a team like a Washington Wizards getting hot at a very bad time and then making a run and eliminating. Like, fans want to see ultimately the best teams play for this thing at the end. And if you give yourself an opportunity to where janky things can happen and a team that you may not necessarily, I'm not saying the NBA doesn't want to see all their teams in. I'm not saying that at all.
They definitely don't want to see that. They want to see their Lakers.
They want to see the Lakers.
They want to see Giannis in the finals.
Exactly.
They want to see Lakers, Boston, maybe. They want to see Joel Embiid. I mean, that
in 2006,
sure.
They wanted to make Dwayne Wade a superstar. I'm not bitter about it. I'm not in. I'm over it. I'm over it. But I think that might have been part of the thought process too, right? You want to eliminate every sort of thing that could potentially screw up what you ultimately want to see at the end. I would think so, right? I mean,
I don't think in the group stage idea, I don't think that would have changed too much to where a team like Washington or a team even, like the Rockets or something could get super hot, because you're still eventually, you have to just get through the first round, and the teams in their groups would have been lined up by, goodness. I guess they would have been lined up by how good they are. So you have, one super good team and a bad team, and then two middle tier teams in there, something like that. So that team, if they're going to go to the finals, the Lakers, Clippers, Bucks, whoever, they still would have been able to get past that group stage fairly easily, I think. So I don't think that would have been a big deal. I don't think they were going to try to change it up too much, but I'm glad they just kept it the way that it is.
Yeah, I guess it could have been like a group stage that led to reseeding into the second round, almost like a World Cup soccer tournament, right? So you take your all the other factors, the points and the aggregate and all that kind of stuff. I obviously wouldn't go that deep into basketball, but yeah, that would be how it worked. But nonetheless, we talk about a team like Memphis, right? Memphis was, once they got to full strength, and you got to see a Zion Williamson come in, which, by the way, I think New Orleans.
It's like Memphis got to full strength too.
Memphis got to full strength too. Yeah, I'm sorry. New Orleans. By the way, I talked to Chris Finch not long ago. You guys check that out. Give us a like here. ePlay Numbers Tell Your Story on YouTube, and check out this is episode 13. We talked to Chris Finch a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, the associate head coach of the New Orleans Pelicans. And we had a chance to talk about that young basketball team, who I think is a very dangerous basketball team moving forward. Where do they kind of fall into this right now?
New Orleans, so they're right there with Portland. If both those teams go 8-0, they'll both be 500. And so then you have to figure out, what does that mean for a tiebreaker scenario? What does that mean for play in? Do both the teams play Memphis, or do they do some kind of round robin thing? That's going to be interesting, but they have a chance. I mean, they have a chance to, if they win more of these regular season games, they could play Memphis. They could definitely beat Memphis, and they could go on to play the Lakers, which would be what the NBA probably wants. They either want Lillard or Zion to play the Lakers in the first round, because then you at least get some ratings for that outside of just Lakers fans. So yeah, that's going to be fascinating.
I guess I was thinking Memphis, because I was thinking about all the youth, and right, you got Ja, who was, I guess he's the rookie of the year, right? So Ja Morant in Memphis, that was a team that made a lot of noise and made a nice run and won some basketball games and looked good. And then New Orleans, when they got back to full strength, I believe they were like 6 or 7 games above 500 when Zion came back. And you talk about the youth of that team. I love Brandon Ingram. He's a guy that I would love to see in a Mavericks uniform. I'd love to see we could talk free agency stuff and future Mavs stuff later on, because Montrezl Harrell is that's my guy right there at some point.
It's an interesting name.
I love him. Love that guy.
And he's super underpaid right now. So
super underpaid.
He definitely wants a payday coming up. So.
Yeah, he's a guy that could use something like ePlay, where we can go, hey man, here, let me show you what you do and how much you produce and why you deserve that, why you deserve to get paid.
That'd be quite an easy job for us. Hey, look, you do these things well. You're one of the best field goal percentage guys. You're incredibly efficient inside, and look at what you're getting paid, and this is what you should be getting paid. I mean, easy. That's easy money for us right there.
part of what we want to do at ePlay is see the best product that we can on the floor, and to help players get to that level and say, we want to use their numbers to their advantage, as opposed to where it's been used against them for so long when it came to contract negotiations, picking out a couple of anomalies and saying, this is why we don't think you deserve this contract. Well, today's money in the NBA is pretty insane. But Memphis, New Orleans, these young and up and coming teams, if you're in the Western Conference, which has been loaded for a long, long time, again, people that are Eastern Conference basketball fans, that's why you had one team that kind of got an opportunity to go fishing, if you will, for a chance to make a run here. It's just because the disparity is quite large. Come on, it is. Like I would say the record wise, the top 4 teams in both conferences look fairly similar record wise, but it would be hard to argue that there's anybody in the East right now apart from Milwaukee, in my opinion. I mean, you could argue, yeah, but apart from Milwaukee, that I would think could be built right now to make a run against a top team in the Western Conference. But if you're in the Western Conference, you're looking at teams like New Orleans and Memphis and those up and coming. I mean, you're looking at a conference that's going to be really hard to run through for a decade plus.
Yeah, and there's so many more teams than just Memphis and New Orleans. Like those teams have the young players at the forefront, but the Mavericks are right there. I mean,
Yeah.
both their star players are under the age of 25. You have the Nuggets, both their star players are 25 and under. I think Jokic is 25, I think, and Jamal Murray is like 23.
At some point, Phoenix is going to get it together.
They could.
They could.
They could.
Oh man, that was okay. That's
they could, I guess. The ownership situation there is a little tough to get over. It's not it's kind of a goat in the office situation.
Mm-hmm.
The Lakers have Anthony Davis. He's still 26. I mean, he's super young. So if they re-sign him for a long-term deal and they retool around him once LeBron is done, or he goes and plays with Bronny Jr. with the Knicks, I mean, whenever that happens, Oklahoma City is going to have $1 billion draft picks coming up, and they have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's already one of the best, under 21 players or 21 and under players. There's a lot of really good youth coming out. Minnesota has Towns and Russell now. They have something to prove, and they have those two guys that if they can tool around them, then maybe they can make some noise. Towns is still really good. Russell, it's almost the same as Phoenix, right? Like
kind of.
Yeah. They have really good players, but you're just not super stoked about everything
Sacramento
else
too. Sacramento, like I expected them to be. They've got such young, good talent, and you got some of these franchises that just have weird times putting it all together.
Yeah, well, it's getting over the humps. There's certain like levels of NBA teams, right? And you never want to be in that middle tier where you're just kind of going 500. You kind of make the playoffs, but you don't really have a chance to make the finals, and you don't really have a chance to bottom out, and you just kind of hang out in the middle there. And some of these teams just have a hard time transitioning. You have like Minnesota, Phoenix, Sacramento. Those teams have such a hard time transitioning out of their pools. Phoenix was good for a little while with Steve Nash, and then they couldn't transition out of it, and they just kind of went downhill and didn't have a plan after Steve Nash left, and then they just bottomed out. And now they're sort of getting back there, but it's taken them such a long time to get out of that bottom tier. Sacramento has been at the bottom tier forever. And they, since 2004, 2003, when the Kings were good with Peja and Vlade and Chris Webber. I mean, they've had a hard time transitioning out and trying to get there because they can't seem to just bottom out enough to get a number one pick. And then even when they get top picks, they pick Georgios Papagiannis. I mean, they do weird things like that.
Or they go Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic.
Or they do that. That is the one I overlooked. But yeah, those teams they struggle to transition, but now they have some young talent, and a lot of them are under new leadership we haven't seen in the past. And so it'll be interesting. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, do the Rockets, the Rockets are going to be super old really fast here. And how do they, transition out of this? How do they change out of that? What does Oklahoma City do with their young talent? Does Utah is going to be one of the most interesting teams coming into this, because do they have chemistry issues? Does Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, is that relationship, is that salvageable? Is that even an issue? It could be a non-issue. It could just be, something that was maybe a argument that they had about, Rudy Gobert coming down, testing positive for coronavirus, and then Donovan Mitchell testing positive, and Rudy Gobert kind of being super cavalier about it. Is that an issue for them, or is that just nothing? They also don't have Bojan Bogdanovic, their starting four, so that's kind of a knock for them coming into this. But that's going to be an interesting team to watch for sure.
Utah, yeah, that's another one I kind of overlooked. I hate to say that I did that, but that is an interesting dynamic, or certainly something that would be a storyline or a question mark coming into this I guess 2019-2020 season part 2. Post
it's like playoffs plus, right?
Yeah, there you go. Oh, that's so you got to trademark that thing, playoffs plus, kind of like what John Oliver did with Dana White in the UFC. Did you see that? Where he said UF's SEA, and then Dana White, I think the next week, UFC. Bought that trademark or something for Fight Island. But I'm not trying to give them free publicity, by the way.
Just gave away money right there.
Yeah, absolutely. That is an interesting storyline. I guess I hadn't thought of that, because we've been, obviously this game, what happened is much bigger than basketball, right? And it touched NBA teams and NBA families. Obviously, Karl Anthony Towns losing his mom. The dynamic with Donovan Mitchell getting in, Rudy Gobert and his Rudy Gobert before he even knew he had it, with the touching of the mics. And as a media member, how pissed off would you have been had he? I mean, obviously he didn't know that he had it, but to be that, blasé about it, cavalier and tone deaf, I guess.
Yeah, well, it was a tough situation because we didn't have a lot of information about COVID-19 coronavirus then. And so there was a lot of people back then. And I mean, if anyone was in an arena like that, which, media people, if they're there, you're doing your job and you probably have to be there. But if you're in that arena to begin with, you weren't taking it seriously, right? Because you shouldn't be around crowds. You should have, covering, your mouth with a face mask or whatever. And so you can blame him for taking it so cavalier and not, protecting other people. But a lot of people were not super, serious about it and not taking it to the, full extent, not taking as many precautions as they could have because of the lack of information and the lack of knowledge about it. People just didn't know. I didn't know a lot about it before. And then after that happened and the NBA shut down, I mean, that's what really opened up the whole country's eyes, right? I mean, it was pretty incredible to watch the NBA shut down and then the country follow after that, right?
Well, I was watching that game live. I mean, and then the Mavericks are playing and I'm like, you see Cuban's reaction on the sideline. That's the day that I knew, oh God, this is big. You don't shut down industries that large if you're just being cautious. This is some serious stuff. So,
right.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I almost felt bad for Rudy. I really did. I still kind of do. I feel bad that because like you said, I think Rudy was an embodiment of how we as a country, as a nation, we're sort of overlooking this or not taking it seriously enough. And we can go into why that is, but obviously it starts from the top down and we weren't getting all the information that we need. And when people at the top sort of tell you not to worry about things, you just don't. I don't know if you watch Real Sports or any of that kind of stuff. And they're talking about how, soccer stadiums and before it started to blow up overseas and in Italy and things like that, just how many people were sick going to these games, not knowing what they had. And it just becomes like a petri dish. And I feel bad for the guy. I really do. I felt bad for him.
Yeah, it's going to be if it's not already, it's going to be one of the first lines on his Wikipedia page, right? Just, that's what he's going to be known for. He's the guy the first NBA player to test positive for coronavirus and then to potentially spread it to Donovan Mitchell and then shut down the NBA. I mean, that's what he's going to be known for. And he won Defensive Player of the Year twice. I mean, he could go on to win a title and it's still coronavirus is going to be the first thing in his bio. Yeah. You do feel bad for him. He should have taken it a little more seriously and should have not been as, jokey about it, something serious like this. But yeah, you do feel bad for him. And he apologized. He is working to correct it. He, put out a statement that I thought was good, telling people, hey, I didn't take this seriously. You should take this seriously, donating and all kinds of stuff like that. So it seems like he's tried to make up for it and learned from it, which is what you want people like that to do, is learn.
Before we wrap up here again with Nick Angstadt, it's in the bio. It's in the description of the show at NickManExit on Twitter. We got to talk Mavs. E-Play, we're a Dallas-based company. I've been a Mavericks fan my entire life. I know not everybody is, but everybody knows who Luka Doncic is and Kristaps Porzingis if you're a basketball fan. And if you don't, then I don't know how much of a basketball fan you are. So you cover the Mavericks every single day. So I've got to ask you about this team. I know that last week, kind of jokingly, it got thrown out that one of the biggest players that I was worried about in coming back, or that I wanted to see kind of continue their contributions that we saw through the first 68 games or whatever it was of the regular season, and that's Tim Hardaway Jr. I felt that this season for Tim Hardaway Jr. and his contribution to that basketball team was as big as anybody, more than anybody could have expected. So he's a guy that I'm a little worried about in terms of hoping that consistency kind of comes back. But also, we sort of saw the emergence of a Seth Curry. He was starting to get into his self, but I think a layoff for him has been good too, because he had a couple of things that kept him out for some period of time. But in terms of this basketball team, specifically the Mavericks, who should be, who should fans be a little be worried about? What should they look forward to? Give me some inside Mavericks stuff, man.
Yeah, some thoughts are, Luka Doncic and his conditioning / injuries, that's something to definitely look out for. I think it's going to be a positive for him to take some of this time off. He's been able to go home. He's been eating right from all the reports. He's been, working out from all the reports. And so we'll see if that, proves to be true when he comes back. But that one, I think, is definitely a positive for the layoff. Kristaps Porzingis, I don't know if it's a positive or negative. We saw some videos of him working out on Instagram. It looks smooth. It looks like he's, getting to all his spots, and it looks like he's able to dominate a chair in a workout room, right? That's what it looked like from the videos. He's able to cross over a chair, which looks good. But I don't know if this could be rust or if this could be rest. Like, I don't know what that's going to be like for him and for his knee and all that kind of stuff. I think he was just getting fully healthy. And so he's probably still there. I don't think it's going to regress, in this time. Tim Hardaway Jr., I understand the concern of, like, what's he going to look like, because he was having his best shooting season and probably his best season of his career, given the context and situation. And you just hope that the time off, he doesn't come back and just revert back to that 31%, 3-point shooter, that he continues to be a 40% 3-point shooter. And that's
bad
really
shot
tough.
Taker.
Right. You just hope that everybody reverts back to the way they were playing before, because it was almost a well-oiled machine. I mean, they were playing super well. Dwight Powell is not coming back. I know that's the thing. Jalen Brunson's also not coming back. Those are two guys that were dealing with injuries. Maxi Kleber, everything seems to be the same with him. Seth Curry, I'm not worried about him at all, really. He's always been a consistent shooter wherever he goes. He's one of the best 3-point shooters by percentage in NBA history right now.
Yeah.
And talk about numbers. I mean, he's consistent all the way across the board, so you're not super worried about him, coming back. DeLon Wright, you sort of worry about. The only thing basketball-wise.
Let me ask you this. Okay, I got to talk about DeLon Wright, because I love the guy, and to me, the blessing in disguise. I love Jalen. I love Jalen Brunson. He's about as steady as it gets in terms of the point guard position, and just a guy that came into the NBA as a veteran player, just a smart guy, never going to light it on fire, but a guy that could be a rotation player for 10 plus years. I feel like DeLon Wright. I feel like there's minutes for guys like him, because I think he does a lot of things that you need to do to win basketball games. And I could be wrong here. My eyeball test and the numbers may tell me different stories, and that could be where you check me and go, yeah, well, the numbers say this, Jamie. I feel like DeLon Wright deserves a little bit more run at times, and I feel like maybe he deserves a little bit more of an opportunity from the fans to say, like, guys like that, guys that do what he does deserve minutes, in my opinion. You can always find a spot for a guy like that on the floor.
That's the thought on DeLon Wright. The idea of DeLon Wright is great. You have a point guard that can kind of run some offense. He had those, you have 2 triple doubles against the Mavericks last year when he was playing for the Grizzlies. And so that's what really opened Mavericks fans' eyes to him, that he can play make, he can do some stuff. He's shooting 38% from 3. He's also shooting over 50% from 2. He's, it seems like it's pretty solid, right? He's averaging over a steal a game, 3 assists, 4 rebounds, 7 points in just over 20 minutes. And so you look at all those numbers and you say, okay, that's a solid player. He should be getting more run. But when you're watching him, and this is where the eye test comes into play, he's so hesitant on anything offensively. It just didn't seem like he was really fitting into his role on offense the whole year so far. There are times when he was aggressive and he attacked the basket and he attacked and he kicked out to players. That's when he was at his best offensively, when he was able to do that. And when he wasn't, because he was nervous about his 3-point shot, his 3-point percentage, or if he was worried about, I don't even know what he was worried about. Like, just attack the basket. When he was doing that, he was at his best and he was playing really well. But when he's not doing that, what are you getting on offense, right? Like that's the other question about him. And so you're either watching, Seth Curry or watching Jalen Brunson go do their thing and dribble around, or JJ Barea go dribble around and do their thing and make offense happen. And he's just kind of standing around and not really contributing that much. So it seems to be a mental situation. There's been talks with him about whether he likes coming off the bench or he thought he was going to be the starter. I mean, a lot of us, I think, thought he was going to come in and be the starter right away, but he ended up coming off the bench and being that, sixth man-ish role. Defensively, he has not been as good as I think a lot of us expected him to be.
Okay, I agree.
Right, and so that's been a little bit of a disappointment as well. But offensively, it's been being aggressive. Defensively, it's been about just taking care of the person in front of you and staying in front of players and things like that. a little bit of a struggle for him in a way that seemed to be a given at the beginning of the year and hasn't necessarily been one. And the competition, I mean, Jalen Brunson's been huge competition. JJ Barea, in the spot minutes that he's played has been competition. And Seth Curry is also competition at point guard minutes. There's just so many. And whenever Luka plays, 40 minutes, 41 minutes in a game that the Mavericks really need him, that's your point guard for all those minutes. And there's only 7 minutes of point guard time left. And so it's kind of hard for a player like that to really find his role. And he's had conversation about that. I think we heard his brother, Darrell Wright, talk about how DeLon has had issues figuring out his role in this team. And he's been really the one player on this team that hasn't really found his role, right? That's not an end of the bench guy, Courtney Lee or Willie Cauley-Stein or somebody like that. He's been kind of the only guy,
about
right?
Willie Cauley-Stein. Forgot he's on the team.
Yeah, the Trill, he's still there.
The thing about DeLon is that you see enough from him to know that there is a role there. There is a role that he can play. I guess figuring out what that role is key. And hopefully there's been enough time here. Hopefully there's been some things where that role becomes a little bit more defined here at the end, because certainly he's a guy that they're going to need. That depth has been key for this basketball team.
I just don't know about the time of it, though, because I feel like the more time, the coaches haven't talked to players. Carlisle has said, he came out in an interview with, I think, Ernie Johnson, said he hasn't talked to any of the players. So it's not like they're coming up with, more strategy, defining more things. They've just been paused, right? And so coming back, you wonder if it's just going to be the same thing, which for some players, Tim Hardaway, Dorian Finney-Smith for sure, like that's good. Keep the same, keep the same mindset, keep the same, touch on your shot, all that stuff. Keep that the exact same. Don't change anything. But for a guy like DeLon Wright, you wanted some change. I don't think you're going to get it with the stoppage. I wonder if it becomes more murky as they try to almost like rush everything back and try to get to play basketball as soon as possible.
How good is Maxi Kleber? He's one of my favorite players, and I know he's a fan favorite. But in terms of his numbers, in terms of his contributions, in terms of what he's about to garner on the market, how good is he as a basketball player? Because I think he's on his way to being in the talks in terms of like defenders in this league, and in terms of guys that do those dirty work things. Up there is I wouldn't say elite, but a bubble elite kind of player in terms of that thing that he brings to the table, defense, energy, that sort of thing. How good is Maxi Kleber?
Yeah, there's not many guys that can get you, over a block a game and over a 3-point, made a game, right? There's just not many people like that. Porzingis is one of them on the Mavericks team. You think of a guy like Joel Embiid could be that one of those guys. Karl Anthony Towns could be one of those guys. And then you just kind of run out of names, right? Like maybe Dwayne Dedman, maybe, like a Lauri Markkanen, maybe, but he's not the greatest defensive player. There's just not too many guys that can do that. And there's not many guys that can do that are on the role player level. It's a lot of star players that are able to do that. And so to find a guy like Maxi that can be your 3-and-D player as a center, that's an incredible find for the Mavericks to get him, undrafted. He shoots well from 3. He defends the paint well. He can defend out on the perimeter. There was a game, I think it was the last time the Mavericks played the Celtics, that he guarded Jason Tatum for a lot of the second half, and he looked amazing guarding Jason Tatum. It was so wild to see that. And so he's a really rare find for the Mavericks, and he's been awesome. He's my favorite player, maybe in the NBA, but definitely on the Mavericks, because covering the team, he was just awesome to talk to. And you go up and talk to him, and maybe this is a bad bias I had, but I expected him to have like broken English and not talk very well. It sounds like he's been here his whole life. He has incredible English, and it was awesome to get to talk to him and get to know him. But
he's a bit of a heartthrob now around Dallas. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, for sure.
The ladies love Maxi.
And he recently signed, a couple-year deal here. So he's going to be around for, I think, 3 years. Yeah, 3-year deal with the last year being a player option or a team option. No, it's partially guaranteed. So, yeah, he's going to be around for 4 years pretty much with that last year. So this year and then 3 more years after that, he's going to be around. So the Mavericks did really well to sign him this past year to a longer-term deal. The same with Dorian Finney-Smith. They got him on the discount. They got him on a lower number, and teams won't be able to poach him away. They could try to trade for him, but he's on the Mavericks for the next 3 years if the Mavericks decide that he's going to be.
And he's a guy that we've seen pick up all 5 positions too. I mean, he's a guy that's defended all 5 positions in the past. I mean, he's an invaluable piece and a guy that we've kind of seen grow very quickly in a Mavericks uniform into becoming a player that, again, I think is right there on the verge of, for what he does, an elite in that elite category for the things that he does. And so, look, thank you so much for this. Thanks for coming on. I want to do this again. I'd like to come on and jump on with you guys after maybe a cocktail or two and just sit there and talk Mavericks basketball or something. You know, I've been watching it a long time, man. But it's been a long time. my first memories of Mavericks basketball were the late 80s, right? So you won't remember this, but they used to tape delay everything. Alive. Yeah. In the mid 80s, they used to tape delay everything, right? So you didn't get to watch playoff basketball in like 86 or whatever until it was like, you know, they'd tape delay it and play it the next day, but before the internet and stuff and Twitter. So you didn't really know what was going on, but it wasn't a big thing. You know, then you see the Magic and Bird, but the NBA, the way it's covered now, and this is what I tell all these young folks, I tried to tell them yesterday in Stat Club, the reason that you get to watch basketball the way that you do now, the same coverage, the same sort of, the commercial aspects is because of Michael Jordan. I mean, that was when I saw that stuff happening with him blowing up in the late 80s, early 90s. But my first introduction to Mavericks basketball was those reunion rowdy runs. They were taking the Lakers to 7 games in the conference finals there. And what is that, 88? And I remember being a kid and thinking, this is awesome. But then obviously after that, there was nothing to cheer about until Jason Kidd came along and they won like 36 games. And then they drafted Cherokee Parks in the offseason. And that sort of was that didn't go over well moving forward. But so been around it a long time, been watching Mavericks basketball a long time. I'm glad to have you on, and I'm glad to see that the legacy and that the Mavericks brand lives within a lot of folks, including yourself, even as a guy that's an admitted Lakers fan, born there. You know, that's fine. But the Mavericks are fun. You know, got a great ownership. I love Mark Cuban. I think once he bought the teams, things, you know, you had a guy that was invested more than just monetarily. He wanted to have a winning franchise, and so it's great. I'm so happy to have done this. I'm glad we didn't really get into all the numbers stuff because I like to talk hoops as well. But ePlay Numbers Tell Your Story is the podcast. We encourage you guys to give us a like here on YouTube. You can follow us at ePlay Basketball on Twitter as well. Nick Angstadt, my friend, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day in lovely Daytona, Florida. What's it like out there right now? What do you guys got going on?
It's Gatory.
It's very Gatory. Yeah. You watch? Do you ever follow? What is it? Gators on Twitter. It's Gators for Life or something, and it's just literally a guy that posts alligator videos all the time about him wandering into people's neighborhoods and stuff. Have you had any encounters?
Gators Daily. I think it's Gators Daily.
Gators Daily. Yeah. Have you ever had any encounters out there?
No, I actually haven't. I haven't seen any in the area that I live in. There's like gator farms and gator like zoos, but I haven't seen any in the wild.
All right. Well, do you hope to encounter a gator one day in the wild?
Not too close. They're pretty fast.
Right. They are. That's they're Nature is Metal is another cool one I like to watch on Instagram and stuff like that. Nick, I'm going to let you go, man. It's lunchtime. I don't know I guess it's almost 3:00 there. So, Judge Judy's getting ready to come on.
What is time anymore?
Yeah, I don't have it's time's a construct, man. I don't know. I don't even know. I know it's the month of 6 and that's all I can tell you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
How many hours? That's what time it is.
Nick Angstadt at Nick Van Exit on Twitter, at Locked On Mavs as well on Twitter. Make sure you guys listen every single day to the Locked On Mavs podcast. Where can they find the rest of your stuff, man?
Yeah, you can Locked On Mavericks on Spotify, on iTunes, on all the platforms that you want to find it. You can also find us. We go live every Thursday night. So if you're getting this now, you can, if you're getting this on Thursday, you can catch us live every Thursday on the Hot Mic app. You can download the Hot Mic app and use the code Nick Van Exit, and then you can watch Isaac and I do a live Locked On Mavericks. We do some fantasy drafts. We play, games on, with chat and all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty fun. So you can check us out there.
Thanks so much for doing this, man. ePlay Numbers Tell Your Story. We invite you back tomorrow. Mike James and Eric Strickland return to the show tomorrow. If you guys missed the first Mike James interview, if you missed the first Eric Strickland interview, both of them were awesome. Strick was my very first interview on the Numbers Tell Your Story podcast. Mike James was about a week later. Those guys were teammates together in Milwaukee. So we're going to have some conversations about that because Mike James brought some stuff up in his interview that I have to ask Eric Strickland about. So now I got them both together tomorrow, same time, right here on YouTube. ePlay Numbers Tell Your Story. He's Nick Van Exit. Nick Angstadt.
That'll work.
Doesn't matter. I'm Jamie Horton. Until next time, everybody. Thank you.
If you want to get noticed by recruiters at all levels of basketball, then ePlay's Hoops at Home Challenge is your opportunity. Here's how you can participate in the Hoops at Home Challenge and create your very own ePlay profile for recruiters and for yourself to watch your development throughout your career. Each week, we'll put out a specific combine drill for you to complete. Simply record yourself doing the drill, following our specific video instructions, and post the video to your own social media profile on Twitter or Instagram. Tag ePlay Basketball and then use the hashtag HoopsAtHome. Then go to eplay.com/hoopsathome, click the Get Started button at the bottom of the screen, and fill out the information to start your very own ePlay profile. Once your ePlay profile is live, you can upload additional combine drills in the video workout section of your profile for approval. Check back to ePlay Basketball for future combine drills and start building your profile so numbers can tell your story.
This is Brandon Dean, NBA Skills Trainer and Director of Player Development for ePlay. Over the next few weeks, we'll be putting out a series of challenges for our Hoops at Home Challenge. These challenges will simulate drills performed at our ePlay Combines as well as drills performed at the NBA Combine. This week's drill is the 3/4 court sprint. This is one of the simplest drills to perform, but it's one that a lot of scouts take into consideration when they look at your speed and how quick you can get to that speed. For this drill, you need to set up one place marker 70.5 feet away from your desired starting point. On your go, you're going to sprint all the way through the cone as fast as you can. Good luck.